Hi, it's winter holiday story time. Come close. I'm gonna light a candle. This is a story about a mean, nasty, wicked criminal. This story takes place in the land of ancient China. You see, there was a princess and her father, the king. They lived alone as a family with hundreds of servants, but it was just the two of them. The princess's mother, the queen, had died long ago, and she had no other siblings. It was just she and her father, just her and her father. The princess was extremely fond of her father, and her father, the king, was extremely fond of her. He taught her everything because he knew one day that she would take over ruling the land from him. But back then, in ancient China, she couldn't just rule the land by herself. She had to choose a king, which means she had to get married. And when the young princess was old enough, her father, the king, said to her one day, "It's time. It's time for you to choose a man who will become your king." The princess said, "I don't want to do this. I don't want to. I can rule by myself. I know all the things you've taught me, Father." He said, "I know, but nonetheless, you have to choose a mate to rule the land." So she said, fine, I'll do it. But I will tell you, I will only choose the man who is the most beautiful man in all of the land of China. And the father said, "Well, that's no problem. I'll just put out a ruling that says only the most handsome men can come and test and try out to be the king to my beautiful princess." She said, No, Father. Not handsome, beautiful. They have to have wisdom in their brow, bravery in their jaw, and kindness in their eyes. The king said, yes. Okay, I see. Yes. Strong brow and nice eyes. No, wisdom in his brow, kindness in his eyes, and bravery in his jaw. Okay, said the father. Okay. So the king put out a grand statement to all the people in all the land that his beautiful daughter, the princess, who, by the way, was not just beautiful inside, and believe me, she was. She had also beautiful, silky, long black hair, and she had all the things she wanted in a mate: kind eyes, wise brow, wisdom, and bravery, and so many other things: courage and strength and empathy. So the father put out to all the people in his land that his princess was looking for a beautiful man, and he named all the things that the princess was looking for. So all the men, can you imagine? All of the men in the ancient land of China came toward this little town where the kingdom was, and they were doing their best to get in and try and impress the king and his princess. Now, way over in the other part of town, far away from the castle, lived a mean, nasty criminal. He lied, he stole, he cheated, he was mean, He was terrible. He was greedy. And when he heard that the king was looking for a husband for his beautiful daughter, the princess, he thought, oh my God, if only I could be chosen for that. Can you imagine? I'd be so rich. I'd be so powerful. And he thought, what could I do? What could I do? And then he went and he looked in the mirror. And boy, he was not beautiful. His eyes were unkind. He was not wise. He made terrible mistakes and choices. And he was not brave. But he was clever. And he said to himself, what if, just what if I could trick her and her father and make her think that I was kind and wise and brave? And he thought and thought and thought. And he had plenty of money because he was a thief. As a matter of fact, he had a bag of gold sitting in the corner next to his donkey who was tied up. And he thought to himself, I've got money. And I know there is a legendary sculptor who lives way up in the snowy peaks of the mountain. And I've heard he can sculpt anything and make it so beautiful. So the criminal gathered up all his gold and stuffed it into the bag as much as he could, threw it over his back, untethered his donkey, and off they went. Through the town, down into the valley, up over the other end, past the kingdom, the castle, the palace, and way up into the mountains. And it was so snowy. And the higher they got, the deeper the snow got, but the purest of pure snows, until finally, way, way, way up high in the distance was a small little cabin, shimmering with light on the tops of the snowy peaks. The criminal saw it. He tethered his donkey to a nearby tree. He hoisted the big heavy bag of gold up, and he trudged up the rest of the mountain until he got to the doorway of the sculptor. He pounded on the door. The sculptor opened it a crack and said, what do you want? And the criminal said, I want you to make me something. And he threw down his bag of gold. The artist, the sculptor, opened the door. He said, come in, come in, come in. And the gold was in there. And the criminal said, I want you to make me the finest mask you have ever made, out of the purest elements you can imagine. And I want the eyes to be the kindest eyes, and the brow to be the wisest brow, and the jaw to be the bravest, strongest jaw that you've ever made, that anyone has ever seen. The sculptor, he said, yes, I will do it. I will try. Go away. Come back in 3 days. But before you go, I want you to dig deep and find me the purest snow that you can find and bring it to me for my mask. So the criminal went out and he looked around to find what was the purest snow. There was snow everywhere. But just as he was looking, a beautiful shimmering light from the moon fell upon a patch of snow. And just for a moment, the criminal thought, that's beautiful. And he dug up a big pile of snow and gave it to the sculptor. Now, the criminal did not go far. Even though he was cold and freezing, he covered himself up in blankets. He made a small shelter, and he and the donkey stayed up there in the snowy mountains for 3 days. He could hear banging and clanging and yelling and all kinds of things coming from the sculptor's home. And finally, on the evening of the 3rd day, the sculptor opened his door and called out that the mask was ready. The criminal walked back up, went inside, and the sculptor gave him something that was covered in a beautiful cloth. He gave it to him. The criminal opened the cloth. It was magnificent. He couldn't believe it. It was perfect. The eyes were so kind. The brow was so wise and calm, and the jaw was strong and sturdy and brave. And the criminal put it on. He even felt different when he put it on. Thank you, he said to the sculptor. The sculptor's eyes got big. He couldn't believe what he'd just done. He'd transformed the way this man looked. But away the criminal went, gone, back down the hill and through the woods into the valley and straight to the palace where the king and his princess were. Now at the palace, there were lines for days of men waiting to meet the princess, to see if they would be chosen, to be picked to be her husband. The criminal got in line with the hundreds of other men. And as he waited, he looked and he could see in the distance what was happening. The princess had a full tea set made, and each man was allowed to sit down with the princess. The princess would serve him tea. She would ask some questions. They would talk a little bit, and then the man would leave. As the criminal got closer, he noticed that there was a tiny bell next to the princess that she never touched. He got closer and closer and closer as the hours went by. And as he got closer, he started to notice that he was going to have to answer questions. He was going to have to talk to her. And he thought, what if she asks me a question? I won't know how to answer. I don't know how to be wise. I don't know how to be kind. I'm not going to know how to answer anything. And he thought, just be calm. Just be calm. You don't know what she'll say. Just be calm. Finally, after almost a whole day of waiting, it was the criminal's turn to sit down with the princess for tea. He sat down across from her. He was struck not just by her beautiful face and her beautiful long black hair, but by her eyes and her smile and her expression and her warmth. And she looked at him and she said, how are you? And the criminal thought, how am I? Well, what does a kind person say? What does a wise person say to this? I'm fine. How are you? He said back. And she said, I'm tired. And they began to talk a little bit. And every time she asked him something, he kept thinking, what would a kind person say? What would a wise person say? How would a strong, brave person answer this question? And they talked, and they talked, and they talked, and they talked. And finally, after quite a while, the princess reached over and picked up that bell and rang it. And her father said, she's chosen! My darling, my beautiful princess has chosen. And he lifted up the criminal and said, this is the man. This is the most beautiful man. The criminal had fooled her. He was so happy. Underneath that mask, he was grinning from ear to ear, thinking, I'm gonna be rich. I'm gonna be powerful. I fooled them all. I can't believe it. I won. And then, just like that, the king came over to congratulate him and shake his hand and hug his beautiful daughter, and then said to the criminal, now, before you can marry my daughter, you must live with us in the palace for 1 year. Only then will you be wed. The criminal couldn't believe it. A year? A whole year. A year of wearing this mask, of pretending to be kind, of pretending to be wise, pretending to be brave. Oh gosh, he thought. But he went home. He packed his bags And the next day, he was at the palace. Every morning, he woke up earlier than he ever wanted to. Every morning, he looked to the princess and said, "What are we going to be doing today?" "Oh, today we're going to be studying my father's laws. We're going to be reading all the laws of the land to study them and know them." And he thought, what would a wise person do? A wise person would study. And the next day, what will we be doing today? Oh, today we're going to go to the place where the people live who have less than us, and we're going to feed them. And the criminal thought, what would a kind person do with this? A kind person would go help happily and joyfully. And the next day, what are we going to be doing today? Today, we're going to go into the woods. I've been studying all the medicinal herbs and plants, and we have to pick the ones and make sure they're not poisonous. And he would have to think, what would a brave person do? A brave person and a wise person would be conscious and careful about picking these plants. Every day, day after day after day, for an entire year, the criminal had to do all these things that he did not know how to do and he didn't even think he liked. But as time went on, it became a good habit. He liked getting up in the morning. He liked helping people. He liked picking herbs. He liked studying the law. He liked studying the stars. He liked studying all the things the princess was telling him. Finally, it had been exactly 1 year. Over dinner that night, the princess looked to the criminal and said, Tomorrow is our wedding day. I'm so pleased. You truly are the most beautiful man." And the criminal smiled just a little bit. And then he felt something he had not ever experienced. He felt upset. The princess left him, and he started to walk back to his own room. And suddenly, something overcame him. I can't do it. I can't marry her. I'm not wise. I'm not brave. I'm not strong. I'm not kind. She has been nothing but good to me, and I have lied to her. I can't do it. I can't do it. So he asked for one of the guards to go tell the princess to meet him outside in the garden at midnight under the moonlight by the fountain. He was going to tell her the truth. He waited and waited and waited. The sun went down, the stars came up. They were so bright, and finally, he went out to the garden and waited. At exactly midnight, the beautiful princess came outside. She looked shining and bright under the moonlight and the stars. And she said to him, "What is it, my love?" He looked at her and he said, "I am not who you think I am. I have to tell you something." And the princess said, "You can tell me anything. What do you need to tell me?" And the criminal said, "I have lied to you. I am not beautiful. I'm a mean, nasty, lying, stealing, cheating, no good criminal. I'm not wise. I'm not kind. I'm not brave. This is a mask. I had it made to trick you because I wanted to be powerful and rich, but I can't do it. I can't go through with it." The princess stepped back from him. A look came over her face, and she said, "Take off that mask." The criminal hung his head down. He reached his hands up. He pulled the mask off. And he looked at her. The princess looked at him. She said, "Come with me, I want to show you something." And they went over to the fountain. And she told him to look at his reflection in the waters of the fountain. The criminal looked at his reflection. And do you know what he saw? His brow had become wise. His eyes had become so kind. His jaw had become brave and strong. He was calm. He had become incredibly beautiful. The princess said, "I don't know who you were before, but I know who you are now, and you are the most beautiful man in the land of China. And tomorrow you will be my husband and my king." The end. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite stories.